Hello everybody, and welcome back to the shop. It's great to have you back again. So in the last episode, we cleaned up the shop a little bit. So now that we can actually work in the shop and we have good space to do so, before I can make anything really cool, I gotta go back to the basics. So I haven't been forging as often as I'd like for the past year, so my skills are a little rusty. So I need to do something that I can practice hammer control, practice metal manipulation, and do all those things with something that's usable. I don't want to just start a piece of steel and shape it into a knife and go from there. I want something that I can apply and use and not feel bad about by the end. So in my mind, the best thing to do is a hook. Now, a hook kind of sounds really simple, but I have need for it. So I bought a shower caddy. I don't want to hang it on the shower head. I want to hang it off a hook that's in my bathroom. So I want to make this hook. So I'm going to use a bunch of different styles of steel. No, I'm not. That's a lie. I don't know why I said styles of steel. A bunch of different hammer techniques while working the steel. Perfect. Now, back to what we were saying. I need to practice hammer control and isolation all over again. So with this, I'm going to make a teardrop hook that's going to require me to focus on attention to detail and appropriate hammer strength swinging and stuff, because I'm not just trying to beat the metal into shape. There's an artistry that has to go into it. And hopefully later on, my wife will actually be joining me in the shop, and she'll help me make it. Because as much as hooks can be a one-person job, there's certain portions I'd rather not do by myself, just because it's easier to have somebody else there. So, with that said, the first thing we have to do is pick out our steel. After we pick out our steel, we got to get the forge running. So what are we waiting for? I have no idea. I'm still talking, you're still watching. I appreciate that. Let's get down to work. So we come over to the super dusty, overcrowded metal supply rack, and I could do one out of this round stock, but I want to have a base that I can put at least 2 screws in, and I'm afraid this will get too thin if I do that. So we might have to go with the bigger stuff here. So I'm going to leave it as a bar to start, just because it's easier to work, because I have more space. I can put this in the forge and still have a piece hanging out to work with my hand, so I don't have to use tongs right away. All right, so now we got our steel picked. Let's get the forge ready. Okay. So for the first step here, we're going to take and strike the end of the steel at a 45-degree angle to take it from round stock to more of a sphere at the end to make it more round. I do work the steel a little colder than I should, but it is mild steel, so it's not going to hurt it. So with that, there is some fish slipping that happens. So I'm going to take it over to the grinder and grind off the cold shut that's beginning to happen, so we have a nice spherical end to our round rod. Now the next thing I'm going to do is take it over the edge of the anvil. I'm going to strike down onto the corner, and I'm going to try and create those isolation points, and I'm just turning it a quarter turn each time so I can begin to isolate that teardrop section of the end. So I just take a strike or two until I get the indentation where I want, and then turn it, and then just try to furthermore isolate that teardrop shape, or what will be the teardrop shape of the hook. So here all I'm doing is furthering that isolation, and then I begin to work back the stock the length that I want the curve of the hook to be, and I'm just trying to make that a nice square from our isolation point, because we're going to turn this into the hook, and we're going to leave one of those ridges at the center line of our hook to give it kind of more of an artistic flair to it. Now from here, I'm going to take the isolation point and use both sides of my hammer, both the flat and the round, to begin to transition that isolation point into a more teardrop, raindrop style of a bulb at the end. And that's just, continually turning the corners and trying to work that into a smooth transition. I'm a little rusty, so it's not the prettiest, but you get the basic idea. Now that I've worked from the transition point for the teardrop to the square stock, I'm going to work the square stock and make sure that's nice and cleaned up the way I like it to be so it can flow really smooth. I'm trying to keep the ridges nice and crisp, especially from when we go to do the hook curve, so we have that nice ridge in the center. Now here I have my wife joining me. What we're going to do is start flattening out the spot where our screws are going to go, just to make that nice flat transition. I have her helping strike with me. Here I'm using the cross peen of the hammer to widen out the screw section, just so we have enough width there for the style and shape of hook that I want to do. I'm also trying to keep that ridge that we made in the center so it stays nice and cool as far as the overall aesthetic and look is. Obviously, temperature-wise, it's pretty hot. It's close to 1,000 degrees, but hey, we keep working. Now here what I'm doing is I'm going to begin to bend the hook around the horn of the anvil. This is just, a careful process, so try not to strike too hard so we don't deform our ridge line. It is going to deform some because of striking it against the horn. However, we want to be kind of gentle and try and work it more from the teardrop end than we are pounding on the center of the hook, so we can maintain that nice ridge. Again, that's key for this design, at least for what I'm trying to do for artistic purposes. Now we begin the process of hot cutting. Instead of cooling the steel down and using the grinder to cut off the material, we use an axe-shaped tool to begin to cut through the steel while it's still hot. After we begin to cut through a couple times, I take it over the edge of the anvil to try and break it loose. However, there's still too much material there for it to give all the way. So we straighten it back out and begin to chisel it a few more times, and then I take the pliers and just work it loose with the pliers. Here we begin to work the flat spot for the screw holes to go and the setting place that the hook will rest against the wall. So we just take a couple passes, flattening it out the way we want before we start adding texture in. All I'm doing here is really just refining the shape, trying to keep it symmetrical on both sides. I'm holding it by the curve, trying to keep that center ridge that we talked about before pristine, so I'm not touching that in any way. But we want the shape to be as uniform as possible so it's less time spent on the grinder. We'll probably still have to take it to the grinder eventually to clean up all the deformation that happens from the texturing process. But again, the more uniform we make it in the forging, it's less grinding. And I hate grinding, I love forging, so I try and do most of the work while the steel's hot. Here we're using the ball peen hammers to begin to texture the hook to give it that forged look. It always kind of makes a nice aesthetic for it in the end. Just flattening it out as we go so it doesn't curve too much because it needs to be flat in order for it to sit against the wall. Then we take the center punch and we mark our screw holes. After the grinding, there's still some shiny steel. I want to try and take that away, so I put it back in the forge to get it all warmed up again. And then once it's glowing, we cool it down in the water, and that causes the oxidation to change color and take away the shiny steel and give us that uniform gray that we want. Now it's over to the wire wheel to clean it up, and then we should be just about finished. And we've officially made a hook. This hook has been a little bit challenging, albeit it's my first thing I've made in the shop in a while. So using the hammer again was not something I'm used to. I had the 4-pound hammer, I had a 3-pound hammer, I used the 2-pound hammer, and I'm just putting myself through the paces, but I'm happy to be back at it again. And it's great to have family and friends that support me. And it's great to have you guys who support me. I appreciate all of you who've watched my videos to this point, and those of you who've commented. If you like this stuff, please like and comment, and more importantly, subscribe. I look forward to making more content with you guys, making cool knives and swords and all of the such. And sometimes we have to start with the basics. It's the foundations that we can build on. So if you're in your shop, please feel free to try and make a hook. I promise you'll find a use for it. But as for me, I gotta go hang this in my shower for my shower caddy. Until then, I appreciate you guys and have a great day.